Mr. President, the principles of sovereignty, independence, unity, and territorial integrity are the very foundation of human coexistence in today's world, a world that is made up of nations that boast a rich political, cultural, and religious diversity. These principles ensure peaceful coexistence and fraternity among human beings who inhabit Mother Earth. Therefore, these principles should be scrupulously respected, and the Syrian Arab Republic cannot be an exception to that rule. Mr. President, we denounce before the world the fact that imperial powers and their allies are proposing to trigger a regime change in Syria, even at the cost of further bloodshed. They would claim to reuse the same format as was used in Libya, the consequences of which were dire for international peace and security. They seek to militarily occupy a sovereign country. They seek to drive a coup against its legitimate authorities and turn Syria into a protectorate. The imperial powers and their allies, working in concert with the international media who are at their service, would pretend to turn the city of Homs in Syria's Benghazi into the headquarters of armed groups which operate with foreign support. Alleged human rights protection in Homs, as well as in other parts of the country, are just a smokescreen in order to violate the sovereignty of Syria and to promote a civil war at a large scale. The draft resolution before us is an intervention in the internal affairs of an independent state, since it sets forth several mechanisms for mentoring and monitoring a sovereign nation. If this draft resolution is approved, Mr. President, it will be used by the media to justify a foreign military intervention in Syria. The draft resolution attacks the Syrian government, calling for human rights, while it hides the ongoing and proven human rights violations perpetrated by terrorist groups that commit heinous crimes against civilians and that attack state public officials and facilities using weapons of various calibers. The draft resolution turns a blind eye to the initiatives of President Bashar al-Assad and the institutions of the Syrian state to promote political dialogue with the opposition with a view to achieving an inclusive, democratic, and peaceful national agreement. The draft further ignores the call made by the Syrian government for a referendum to be held on February 26th of this year for a new constitution that would establish a political system based on the principle of political pluralism and power being democratically exercised through elections. The exercise of democracy and popular elections are, Mr. President, the best options to move towards the creation of a political, democratic, and plural system in which all citizens are equal, regardless of their affiliations, ethnicities, or beliefs. The draft resolution denies the Syrian state its right to protect its population and to ensure internal peace and security. The draft asks it to give up the privileges granted by the Constitution for ensuring the country's stability. The draft does not call for, as proposed in the amendment submitted by the Russian Federation, and I quote, it does not call for all sections of the Syrian opposition to disassociate themselves from armed groups engaged in acts of violence, end quote. Nor does it, and I continue to quote from the Russian amendment here, nor does it, quote, urge member states and all those in a position to do so to use their influence to prevent continued violence by such groups, end quote. Mr. President, the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela recognizes the commendable efforts undertaken by the Russian Federation to bring the content of the draft resolution closer to a balanced and objective text. This has not been achieved. We support the initiatives of the Russian Federation as well as those of the People's Republic of China, which have prevented the Security Council from being used in order to violate the sovereignty of the Syrian Arab Republic. The Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela supports the peace efforts made by the Russian Federation in Damascus through the Foreign Affairs Minister Sergei Lavrov. The Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela hopes that these efforts will be supported by countries who truly want a negotiated, peaceful, and inclusive solution to be found in Syria. Dialogue between Syrians should be encouraged. It is not desirable for the logic of war which imperialists seek to impose on Syria and the world prevail. It is not desirable that the logic of war prevail. Mr. President, this General Assembly, which today is discussing the possibility of invading a sovereign country, should instead be concerned with the full recognition of the Palestinian state. It should turn instead to the continued violations of Israel of the rights of the Arab people and how to implement the resolution that calls for the government of the United States to suspend its criminal blockade against the sister Republic of Cuba. Mr. President, for the aforementioned reasons, the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, under the leadership of Hugo Chavez Frias, will vote against the draft resolution before us, A66L33, before us. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, and I now give the floor to the representative of the Democratic Republic of Korea.